Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Sunday, the 5th day of May, 2024. When we were with you 6 hours ago during our first edition of Breaking News for the day, we said there's a lot of things that are on hold right now. We're waiting for developments to take place to further the question of what's going to happen to the hostages. Will there be a release? Will there be an operation soon in Rafah? What is going to take place? Well, since we did that original program earlier today, a lot of things have taken place, a number of stories we have, and two of them are very, very bad. I hate to say it, and let's just hope they're not true, but these are the stories that have come across the wire. All right, let's talk about what we know right now. It's let's see, it's about 12:30 almost Pacific time on May the 5th, and what we saw tonight in Israel was at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Day began. It begins at evening there in Israel. And at the Holocaust Memorial, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to the people there. He got on stage and he began his speech and said this: never again means now. 80 years after the murder of the Jews, evil people have murdered our people. The Nazis drove to kill the Jews until the very last ones. Hamas are the same. We are determined to take those in Hamas captivity, both dead and alive, out of that terrible dark abyss. We are determined to bring them back home to their families. And he said, we're going to do this even if we have to do it alone. Now, let's remember those words. Earlier, he said, nobody needs to tell me what to do. Earlier in the day, he pushed back on some of the pressure he's getting from some of his coalition on the far right. He said, Israel will not agree to a hostage deal that requires ending the war. And Minister Gallant said the IDF operation in the south, Gaza City and Rafah, could come very soon. And so we will see. Now, Netanyahu also said, we'll pause Gaza war for hostage deal, but won't end it. He spoke as the Hamas delegation was in Cairo for hostage talks. And here's the key: with CIA Director William Burns and officials from the mediating countries of Egypt and Qatar. Israel is prepared to pause the Gaza war in exchange for a deal to release the hostages, but is not willing to end it. Prime Minister Netanyahu said during the weekly government meeting on Sunday. We are working in every possible way to free the hostages. This is our top priority, he said. And he spoke again while this delegation was in Cairo for their hostage talks. All right, here's what happened. The Cairo talks ended with no hostage deal. The CIA chief Burns went with the coalition there of Hamas en route to Qatar. The Hamas delegation left for consultations with the group's leaders in Qatar, as reports suggest the terror group agreed to release 33 prisoners in the first stage without committing to ending the hostilities. Hamas announced on Sunday that the talks for a prisoner swap held in Cairo with Egyptian intelligence chief Abbas Kamel ended. The delegation, led by Sinwar's deputy, will return to Doha for consultation with group leaders. All right. Now, here's one of the two stories that are just, well, I don't know what words to put on them. Let me just read them to you. Burns, this is the CIA director, assures Hamas of Israeli compliance, promises the war will halt right after the deal, and he's on his way to Qatar with these Hamas terrorists. Reports that CIA chiefs secured Hamas's commitment to accept the deal at Israel's expense, with the U.S. violating previous assurances to Israeli leaders and setting them up for a trap. CIA Director William, this is from Virtual Jerusalem, by the way. CIA Director William Burns has reportedly assured Hamas that the United States would ensure Israel's compliance with a proposed ceasefire agreement, emphasizing that hostilities would not resume following the deal, not resume. This assurance came during intensive negotiations aimed at securing the release of hostages and initiating a ceasefire in the conflict that has gripped Gaza for over 6 months. Burns' assurances were part of a broader discussion that included high-level intelligence officials from Israel, Qatar, and Egypt, focusing on a detailed proposal to pause the ongoing war. The talks held in various European capitals aimed to establish a framework for peace that would include the phased release of hostages and the cessation of military operations. The revelation of Burns' assurances undermines the Israeli position, preventing Israel from completing its war aims. These developments occur amid domestic and international scrutiny over leaked statements by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was revealed to have disparaged the mediation efforts of Qatar. In a rare Sabbath announcement, we talked about this morning, a senior government official reiterated that Israel would carry out the Rafah operation. Israeli media hurried to report that senior official was Netanyahu. Hamas's demand for a complete halt to the fighting remains a central issue, with Netanyahu's administration rejecting any suggestion that might indicate a permanent end to the military actions. So the stage is set for either Hamas to reject the deal or for Israel to reject the terror group's acceptance. Stormy seas appear ahead. Indeed. And then this story just came across the wire from Axios. It's a scoop that they have. The U.S. has put a hold on ammunition shipment to Israel. I kid you not. So we not only have the CIA director saying, look, if we do a ceasefire now, we'll make sure Israel doesn't continue the battle there. In other words, just take our word for it. We'll put pressure on them. Now we find out the Biden administration has put a hold on a shipment of U.S.-made ammunition to Israel. This is from two Israeli officials. They told Axios. Now, why it matters. What's the first time since October 7th attack that the U.S. has stopped a weapons shipment intended for Israeli military? The incident raised serious concerns inside the Israeli government and sent officials scrambling to understand why the shipment was held, Israeli officials said. President Biden is facing sharp criticism among Americans who oppose his support for Israel. The administration in February asked Israel to provide assurances that U.S.-made weapons were being used by the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza, in accordance with international law. Israel provided a signed letter of assurances in March. Now, the Israeli official said the ammunition shipment to Israel was stopped last week. The White House declined to comment. The Pentagon, the State Department, the Israeli Prime Minister's office didn't immediately respond to questions. Again, the Biden administration is highly concerned Israel will invade the southern city of Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced Palestinians have been taking shelter. And as we mentioned, Netanyahu's made several statements in recent days, says he intends to order an invasion of Rafah, whether or not there's a deal for the release of the hostages. And he hinted at tensions with the Biden administration on the Holocaust Remembrance Day on Sunday. Here's what he said. In the terrible Holocaust, there were great world leaders who stood by idly. Therefore, the first lesson of the Holocaust is, if we do not defend ourselves, nobody will defend us. And if we need to stand alone, we will stand alone. Behind the scenes, last Wednesday, Secretary of State Blinken visited Israel and had a tough conversation with Netanyahu regarding a possible Israeli operation in Rafah. Two sources briefed on the meeting said the following. Blinken told Netanyahu during their meeting that a major military operation in Rafah would lead to the U.S. publicly opposing it and would negatively impact the U.S.-Israel relations. A day later, White House spokesman John Kirby told reporters that Israeli leaders understand that President Biden is sincere when he talks about the possibility of changes to U.S. policy regarding the Gaza war should they move ahead with some sort of ground operation in Rafah that doesn't take into account the refugees. So here we are. According to these last two reports, the CIA chief has basically told Hamas that we're going to give you our guarantee that if you move with the first phase of the ceasefire and release these 33 hostages, we'll make sure the ceasefire is it. It ends. Israel won't go back to fighting. The cessations will end. So just, trust us on this. And we see at the same time, munitions, ordnance, weapons that are meant for Israel to be used that are needed are being withheld now by the United States of America against Israel. I can't tell you how terrible this is. I'm sure you all know this, how heartbreaking it is that our country would do something like this. And of all times, on Holocaust Memorial Day, to do this sort of thing, it is beyond heartbreaking to see this take place. Now, these are the latest stories that we have. We'll see how it all plays out tomorrow. Like I said, it's 10 hours ahead of Israel, so that would make it 11 o'clock tonight or something like that. Maybe not like 8 o'clock tonight, 9 o'clock, whatever. But anyway, the point is the day's effectively over for Israel. And what we'll see is tomorrow how this all plays out. If Hamas comes back and says, all right, we're making an agreement with you, we won't insist that that there's a cessation to the war when we sign the first phase of this. And then if this is the case, hopefully it's not the trap that we just read about that the U.S. is laying for Israel. attempting to stop them from going on once the cessation of, the ceasefire is over for however long, to get these hostages back. It's a fluid situation, it's a developing story, and this is the latest that we know. But we thought you needed to hear this because it's quite some stories. And the two sad ones, of course, are William Burns, the CIA chief, basically undermining the Israel by saying, we'll make sure if you do agree to a ceasefire and release some hostages, that Israel will not continue any hostilities against you. Then finding out that the weapon shipment was just not there, was just not given to Israel, the weapons that they needed. So I don't have to tell you, pray, 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 and let's just see what happens. The good news is we know how all this ends. At the end of the day, when the Lord Jesus Christ comes back, the bad news is that in the short term and then before that, it's going to be a lot of tough things happen in our world. And we'll inform you as they happen here, these things that the Bible talks about. So please, again, take advantage of our free resources on our website, Educating Our World. Remember, everything is free. Our books, we got a dozen books on Bible prophecy, particularly 25 Signs We're Near the End. Everything's free, the free download. And that'll give you an idea of all the things that are going on right now in the world and how it fits with what the Bible predicts will happen in the future. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks again for watching. And until tomorrow, unless something else major happens tonight, we'll talk to you again. Until then, again, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.